Recording is on.
All right, it is recording officially.
Oh, good.
So we are here today to talk about a fantastical movie of sorts called The Last Unicorn. Not the littlest unicorn, not the lost unicorn, but the last one. So what can you tell us about this movie that you recommended?
I don't know how old I was the first time I saw it. I can't remember a time where the movie wasn't in my life or not in my consciousness. So I would have been pretty young.
Yeah,
I can remember being blown away by it.
yeah,
Um, like really impressed because it's accessible to young children, but it also has some very adult themes,
yeah,
and it seems to have like an adult sense of responsibility, but it's also a bit grievous in that regard too.
yeah.
So it seemed like I was really peering into how adults think as a child.
I can see that.
And then I was thinking about King Haggard and comparing him to a lot of like teachers at school or just any adult in my life and thinking, are they as sad and unstimulated as King Haggard? And that's why they are the way they are.
Yeah, I, c- I can I can see that. King
Yeah.
Haggard really lives up to his last name. He's like a he's like a Haggard sob. I guess I
Yeah,
would say.
probably related to Merle Haggard, but not
Well,
as good on the
that's
guitar.
kind of what's funny about it, is that there really are people with the last name Haggard. So
Yeah.
what do you do with those kind of people who really have that last name? That's a bit
Yeah.
unfortunate.
Merle Haggard's name is almost an onomatopoeia given his
Oh yeah,
appearance.
yeah. He looks Haggard himself, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's and Neil Young, he looks haggard, but his last name is Young. So figure that one out.
Yeah, he's a cherished elder now.
Well, he always kind of had an elderly way about him, Neil Young. But we're getting a little bit distracted talking about this, I guess.
Yeah.
So,
Um, I read the books and I was listening to the book on Audible recently,
yeah.
and that's how I was inspired because I hadn't seen the movie in a few years.
Oh, yeah. So you might as well have gotten back into it, right?
Yeah.
So would you say that there's anything that drives the unicorn mad in this story, or is that not really like a symbolic thing?
I think she does kind of go mad
Yeah.
because she dissociates when she becomes a human.
Yeah.
I guess spoiler alert.
Well, I think that's sort of implied by the fact that we're talking about a movie, right? I guess a
Yeah.
lot of people don't really understand that, but we're going to get into some details here, folks. That's the way it's going to go, you know.
Yeah. It seems like she's really traumatized. Like she has depersonalization, derealization disorder.
Yeah.
When she's transformed into a human, she loses her sense of like time and where she is, but she never had a good sense of time. That's like
Yeah.
a human quality that unicorns don't have.
Well, that's because she has like an eternal life or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So when we say that the unicorn goes crazy or whatever, we don't mean the unicorn breaks free from its chains and attacks the crowd or something. It's not like a King Kong kind of story or whatever. That's not
Yeah.
what kind of. It's not really a wild creature. It's like almost inherently tame. Yet its situation kind of forces it to act sort of wildly, I suppose. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. In the book, the white unicorns are like several like thousands of years old, and young unicorns are more of a seafoam green.
Hmm.
But she doesn't actually know what she looks like,
Yeah.
so it's not really clear if she recognizes herself in a mirror or not in the book.
Well, what's interesting is that there's never a moment where the unicorn is exactly mocked. Like there's never a crowd that overpowers it with their laughter. It's just it reminds me a little bit of the Elephant Man, who is like captured in
Oh,
that
yeah.
in that basically caged carnival environment, and the crowd mocks the Elephant Man, but This crowd seems to kind of respect the magical aspects of the creatures.
Yeah, they get tearful in the movie when they see her,
Yeah. So
which
I
is
think,
odd because they don't actually see her.
well, the witch kind of plays a trick and puts the horn
Yeah,
on to her head, so the people think that she is a unicorn. It's weird because she really is a unicorn, but she has to trick the crowd into thinking that she is a unicorn. So it's like you're doubling the unicornness, I guess you might say.
yeah, yeah.
And I have
I
to
guess
wonder about that.
bicorn.
Oh, what?
Yeah,
What
a
was that?
bicorn, a bicorn because she has two horns.
Oh yeah, maybe that's a. I don't know what kind of corn that would be other than a bicorn, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, that's a place where the story does get a little corny.
yeah. I suppose if you want to if you want to phrase it in such a cheap way,
Yeah,
yeah. So obviously a big chunk of the story is about the unicorns eventually breaking free of their bonds, and then they I don't know what they do. They fly into the sky and join the Milky Way or something like that. I don't know. But there's a little bit of a happiness ever after component. So what do you think about that?
um so in the movie, like King Lear is, he's not really super well developed.
Yeah.
Like he just kind of does stuff, heroic stuff. In the book, he's a little more charismatic and has personal relationships with Smendrick and Molly.
Yeah.
Um, so you can see like you can see how the Lady Amalfia kind of falls in love with him. That part's a little better developed too because he sings and writes poetry to her and really helps her get distracted from how sad and confused she is.
Yeah.
So he kind of is the savior figure for her. But then at the end, so I think in the book it's more impactful when she talks about the regret she feels because she chose not to be a human anymore.
Yeah, I would say that one of the things that books tend to get better than movies is having more of an in-depth analysis of the characters, or for allowing an in-depth analysis. Here, it's in a movie format, it kind of seems like the characters really just play a role. I guess you could
Yeah,
say.
yeah. What did you think of the harpy?
Um, it was. I think in the context of the story, it's like a thing they're fascinated by, but the townspeople could quickly forget about it, like the moment
Yeah,
it's gone. That's kind of how I feel about it.
yeah. Did you notice the harpy had three boobs?
No, I didn't notice that
Oh.
actually
I didn't notice that
until you were looking for boobs.
until much later. Like I
Yeah,
remember, I remember seeing it like probably when I was a teenager and seeing, oh, that harpy has three boobs, and they're just hanging triangles, like red tipped bugle chips from her
yeah.
chest.
I have to ask you another question. What do you think about the soundtrack provided by the band America?
I like it. I think it's like a folk rock style, but it works really
Yeah,
well in this movie.
I think that
And
if
it,
this movie was remade, they'd probably have like Mumford and Sons doing the soundtrack or something.
yeah, I
You've heard of them, right?
yeah, I have.
Yeah, that's that's like this definitely has a '70s feel to me. This movie,
Yeah,
and I forget when did it come out again. I'm gonna look it up myself. Oh, 1982. I guess some movies that were made in the early '80s still had a '70s feel.
yeah.
Anyway,
It does have kind of like a cheesiness to it, but when they say, "Can you see her as she sparkles, the last unicorn?" Like it's very cheesy lyric, but it
yeah,
fits the tone, or it sets a good tone, and it fits kind of the artwork in the background.
yeah. So one interesting thing about this movie too is that it's not really about trying to save the world necessarily, or the greatest mission of all time, perhaps. Like there isn't a holy grail or the great flood or anything. They're really just trying to save a magical species from going extinct.
Yeah.
And what are your thoughts on that aspect?
Um, I this might sound a little odd, but I can't help but to compare unicorns to dogs because dogs have kind of a magicalness about them. Like I've known really crabby, unlikable people who are transformed in the presence of a dog.
Yeah.
And then there's people that don't get the appeal of dogs at all. They just seem like kind of gross critters that people own. They don't seem to get it. So I
Yeah.
guess in a ham-fisted way, I kind of see the metaphor there, like the depth of appreciation for dogs that some people just don't have and never will.
Oh, what's that?
Oh, that was a text message on my biscuit. I should have muted that.
Oh, all right. When
But
you
you can
say
leave it in
biscuit, what
if
do
you.
you mean? Because there are a lot of people are going to be like, "What is he talking about?"
Oh, about dogs.
No, you said biscuit. I think a lot of people are going to be
Oh,
wondering what that means. Well, not a
I
lot of
I
people. I don't.
insert that word a lot, kind of like Squanch from Rick and Morty, or
Yeah.
it was my phone.
Okay. Oh, speaking of Rick and Morty, I think one of the main people in charge of that show is in danger of being canceled now over some like abuse accusations.
Hmm.
Not really that that's totally relevant, but once you mention that here, it just is sort of
Yeah,
fresh in my mind.
yeah. I think there's something parallel because a big theme of the last unicorn has kind of abuse of power. Like
Yeah.
Haggard abused his power. Mommy Fortuna abuses her power.
Well, for some reason, like this movie is like it's about a king, right? But I don't think when I watch this movie, I don't think of like kings and princesses and princes and stuff like that. For some reason, it seems a little bit different. I think it's more.
Yeah,
I think it's more unicorn centric. I guess you could say.
yeah,
And there's of course a curse and a and wondering who can lift various curses and all that kind of stuff.
yeah. What did you think of the tree that came to life? Or I guess trees are already alive, but the tree that became animated and sentient.
You know what? I honestly don't remember that part that much, to tell you the truth. But what are your thoughts on it?
It's so odd. Like it's. I'm glad it's in the story because it does add verisimilitude.
Yeah,
Um, just like some quirky magic thing happens where they tie Smendrick to a tree. He's trying to release himself, but he accidentally makes the tree animated, and then
yeah.
the tree loves him.
Oh yeah, yeah. I do remember it better now. Yeah, I remember thinking that tree has some big boobs on it.
Uh, yeah,
That was a very strange thing. Like if this was a song that had lyrics, I don't know how I would write that part into the would it be at the conclusion of the song or like in the middle
yeah,
or the beginning?
yeah. I
It's
think
kind of random.
narratively, it just shows that Smendrick isn't that competent or that great of a wizard.
Yeah,
He doesn't have good control. So I think that's why it's in there. There's more examples of that in the book, but there's like a whole scene where they're in a town where one of Haggard's kingdom towns, and that's all cut out, which makes sense because I think it would have been clumsy in the movie.
yeah. So I think at parts of this movie, I was reminded of the sort of metaphor of being at the edge of a cliff and being told to look into the abyss and stuff like that. I think Haggard kind of represents the abyss kind of dynamic in a story. What
Yeah,
do what are your thoughts about that one?
yeah, that's a good point. I think there's a parallel with Haggard's death and Mommy Fortuna's death because Mommy Fortuna's like last words are, "I held you."
Yeah,
You couldn't have escaped without help. I was the one who held you captive. And then Haggard's last words are, "I knew you were the last one." And so there's like kind of this grasping at straws, getting their consolation prize as they die.
yeah. Well, the cast is definitely an interesting part of this movie because you have Mia
Yeah,
Farrow as the unicorn slash lady Amalthea. Am I even pronouncing that correctly? I don't know.
Amalthea.
Yeah, Amalthea. however it's pronounced.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering what you think about Mia Farrow's performance.
It's really good. It seems like she has some subtle changes when between the unicorn and the Lady Amalfia,
Yeah.
where it's subtle enough that you see a shift in perspective, but not so subtle that it's or not so abrupt that it's jarring. I think it's perfectly applied.
So I have to ask you this question that's going to make me sound weird, but is it weird that I find the unicorn more attractive than Lady Amalthea? Like, does that make me
Uh,
some sort of pervert? I just
no, I
think it's
think
more attractively drawn. I suppose
yeah.
I should say. I wasn't like, oh man, that unicorn is hot looking. I just mean
Mhm.
like more appealingly drawn, like magical or something.
Yeah. Yeah, Lady Amalfia is probably would be more something that you'd be used to seeing, like a
Yeah,
kind of just a cartoon character with big eyes.
basically, yeah. It kind of it kind of reminds me a little bit of an anime story somehow.
Yeah.
Like I could actually imagine this transposed into an anime film.
Yeah.
So when it comes to Schmendrick the magician, um, I I don't think it was like a stock character exactly, but I do think in terms of the movie, he was really the most like a device. I would say,
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
you know, I mean, he definitely plays a role, but it seems like the characterization is almost interchangeable with some other fantasy stories, I suppose.
Yeah.
And what do you think about Jeff Bridges as Prince Lear, who is
Oh,
King Hagrid's son, adopted son?
yeah, so in my early life obsession of this movie, like I every time Jeff Bridges comes up, I always think first, oh, that's the guy from the Last Unicorn. Like that's just how I view it. Like I
Yeah,
know most people probably think of the Big Lebowski or something, um, but my mind goes to the Last Unicorn. I think he does pretty well for the performance. It doesn't sound that much like him, but I think he would have been like 22
younger,
or yeah,
probably. I would assume.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah, it's a pretty good performance though.
yeah, I would. I would say that I enjoy his performance. Oddly enough, I think one of my first wasn't Jeff Bridges in that King Kong movie from the 1970s that people seem to hate.
I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for some reason that's really the first movie that I remember him from. So often when people mention his name, I think of King Kong. What is it, 1976? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then there's a Molly Grew. What are your thoughts on that character? I really
In
had to
the
look.
book, in the book, Molly Grew is 37,
Yeah.
which is my current age.
Hmm.
And I get that it's like a medieval setting and people typically died younger.
Yeah.
But they talk about her of like she's so mad at the unicorn. She says this, "Where have you been? How dare you come to me when I'm like this, when I look like this?" And
Yeah.
I was thinking about my own life in that regard. Like, do I feel, I don't know, too old for something?
Yeah.
And the unicorn, I don't know. I think maybe my career in some regards is like, how dare my career come to me when I'm like this? But at the same time, um, like I get more street cred for being older looking as opposed to like people who are like 25
Yeah.
and starting off as in psychology. They don't get much trust or respect from some clients,
Yeah.
but I get that better, and I think that's probably because of like white male presentation too. But um like it seems like people are more trusting of my authority, where I've had supervisees in their mid-20s and no client seems to trust their authority. So
Yeah.
I don't know, that seems a bit tangential, but something
Oh
that
well.
was a
People are
train of
just gonna.
self-reflection.
I don't really know how many listeners I will have on this anyway. I might have
Yeah.
a handful, but don't worry too much about tangents.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of tangents, the butterfly character in this movie really goes on a lot of tangents, And
Yeah.
they really don't show the character that much, but it's very important in the beginning. So, what are your thoughts on the butterfly? Speaking
It's a
in
pretty
riddles.
memorable character. I
Yeah.
do one of my favorite lines from the movie is where the last unicorn asks like, "Do you know what I'm called?" And the butterfly says, "Rumpelstiltskin." Ha ha! I like that part.
It's actually pretty random.
Yeah,
I think it's an interesting idea that butterflies would only speak in riddles and poems and song lyrics. It
yeah,
was a it was an interesting idea.
yeah. There's kind of like a Robin Williams
Oh
like
yeah,
style supernatural character, like Robin Williams as the genie in Aladdin.
yeah.
The butterfly.
I have to admit I've never seen that movie. Oddly
Oh, okay.
enough, but
So the big difference is he references modern stuff, and the
yeah,
butterfly kind of keeps it contained to where it's a little bit more believable to that world.
yeah,
So I like that it has some unity.
yeah. And I looked at the actor's name and it's Robert Klein. I'm not very familiar with his stuff, but I probably have seen him in some other stuff. And then, of course, there's Angela Lansbury as Mommy Fortuna.
Yeah,
Quite an
I think she
interesting.
does that character well. Like it's an intimidating character.
Oh yeah, yeah. I I like the idea of a magician who's basically just a sellout who gathers up these magical creatures and uses them as a traveling roadshow, and like that's her main thing in life.
Yeah,
Again, it kind of reminds me of the movie Elephant Man,
yeah,
and I think her character is similarly sort of pathetic. It seems like she has the potential to be something more grand, but she's just for some reason attracted to that lifestyle or relegated to it.
yeah, yeah. Because she seems like I wonder if she's to some extent kind of incompetent too. Maybe I don't mean like she can't do stuff, but and I don't think she's as like Smendrick is, but not like Modbrook or whatever the original court wizard was. Like he's supposed to be some kind of magical genius who can
Yeah,
perform miracles and such. But Mommy Fortuna's like biggest feat, her biggest victory that she clings to when she dies is holding a harpy, which probably isn't that big of an achievement.
yeah. Well, I think one thing about the Mommy Fortuna character is that she's older than Schmendrick, so at least I think Schmendrick has the excuse of youth, whereas
Yeah.
her patheticness, it just seems like she's kind of inherently that way, or maybe being punished for something,
Yeah.
for some character flaws or whatever. And then we talked about King Haggard a little bit already, but obviously Christopher Lee played that character. So, what are your thoughts on his performance?
I thought it was really good. A fun fact is if you watch The Last Unicorn in German, he also does the German voice of
Oh
King
yeah,
Haggard
yeah.
because he spoke German, and I used to watch The Last Unicorn in German to practice.
Oh yeah,
Um, but I think his performance is very amazing. Like I think he brings a lot of
yeah,
um, kind of like an imposing, intimidating piece. But he's also intelligent and thoughtful.
yeah. And the character is even relatively subtle.
Yeah,
Despite being sort of a villain, I guess.
yeah.
And actually, one of my favorite characters in this movie was the skull.
Oh, played by Rene Auberjonois.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I think that could be maybe give him a talk show or something like that.
yeah,
I really don't have
yeah,
much more to say about the character, but he's actually one of my favorites. That
yeah.
This was my first time watching this movie, by the way,
Oh,
so it was interesting. I didn't have the benefit of nostalgia as having seen this as a kid or whatever. I didn't have that, but I still enjoyed it reasonably well.
yeah. I think so. Rene Auberjonois, he played Odo in Star Trek Deep Space Nine,
Oh wow. Huh.
and he did the voice of the chef in The Little Mermaid,
Yeah.
and he was a professor at Juilliard in New York. Um, he taught classes on like mask work in particular,
Hmm.
like how to act with a mask on. But
Yeah.
um, I do think he's a very underrated actor because he can be subtle, but he can also be over the top, and he can blend the two together to create something really deep. So
Yeah.
he has like the funny, like, I don't know, like jovial skeleton, but then he also has like the way the scene's done where the skeleton's shouting unicorn and the eyes start glowing red, like
Yeah.
it really elicits a lot of, I don't know, tension in the scene.
Well, what I like is, I guess it's similar to The Nightmare Before Christmas in that they have a creepy character, but he's actually basically harmless.
Yeah,
Like he's probably the most harmless character in the entire movie.
yeah,
Really, just there for comic relief of sorts. I kind of like that. Tim Burton does that sometimes too. You know, in other movies, I would say.
yeah. Like the in Beetlejuice, where the guy is on the flat guy on the line that like slides by.
Yeah, really just a side character, but reasonably entertaining, partly because of the visual aspects. And of course, there's the fact that they bribe the skeleton with not really wine, but the memory of wine.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
kind of funny.
I think it works well in like the story building side of it too.
Yeah.
And it kind of also reinforces that Smendrick really isn't that great of a wizard, that
Oh yeah.
he has to use trickery.
Yeah. Well, there's a little bit of that thing in the Wizard of Oz too. You know, the
Oh, yeah.
wizard there really mostly uses tricks, but he's so skilled at it, right?
Yeah, yeah. That he's duped the society into following him.
Basically, yeah. Convincing them that he has some great powers when it's really just the power of suggestion. And
Yeah.
obviously, he's got some technological gimmicks up his sleeves too.
Yeah.
So, were there any sequels to this movie? I didn't really look that up.
Peter S. Beagle has other books about unicorns, but I don't think they're sequels
Hmm.
per se. I
Yeah.
think they just take place in the same world.
So there's nothing like the Seven Curses of the Unicorn or the Last Unicorn 2 Lost in New York.
Or the
Anything.
second to last unicorn, the prequel.
Or they could have the new batch, I suppose.
Oh, yeah.
You know, in terms of corny sequels, or the Last Unicorn in the Hood, or
Yeah. Last unicorn in Manhattan.
yeah, there we go. Yeah. Um. So I don't know. Is there anything else you have to say about this movie?
Oh, I I really like it, but that seems pretty obvious. I guess no, I don't have anything else to say.
All right. Um. Because this is like already going on 40 minutes. So
Oh,
we actually talked quite a bit about the movie. I hope that people out there appreciate the appreciation that Troutface has for the movie, and you know, hopefully
did
you learned a thing or two about it. You gained some insight into what the characters are like, and maybe some themes that the movie has, and all that
did you
kind of
like it
stuff.
overall?
Yeah. So all right, I guess with that, I'll probably call it a day here, and you know, next time maybe we could talk about music, like an album or something. We can talk about music,
Oh, okay, yeah.
and I guess I could do the decision for that.
Okay, yeah.
All right, so well, have a holly jolly Christmas,
Oh,
and
thank you. You too.
may your Jesus, I can't speak. May your unicorns not be the last ones.
Yeah, from the heart of my bottom, I wish you a hairy biscuit.
Wow. All right. Have a good day.
Okay, bye.